You're listening to another episode of Rig Recon Live. This is episode 3. Today we're going to be talking about foam systems. I'm Bruce Quick alongside Jason Witmier. We do have a special guest today who we'll get to a little bit later, but first let's do a couple housekeeping items. If you haven't already, make sure you follow, like, and share us wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to us on YouTube at Rig Recon and follow us on social media at Rig Recon. And then most importantly, make sure you visit our website, www.rigrecon.com, where you're going to get the full library of apparatus content, whether it's how-to videos, technical guides, product guides. You can even listen to this podcast and catch up on all the latest fire apparatus industry news. So, Jason, episode 3, pretty excited here. We're going to be talking about a pretty controversial subject, but I feel like we're bringing in the industry expert on this subject. So I'll introduce Dan Tyrrell. He's one of us here at Safely. He's been with us for a year. He's here as our foam product specialist, and he comes to us with over 25 years of fire service experience, including stints as a volunteer firefighter and a foam firefighting instructor. And he's got an extensive background in everything foam, including chemistry, testing, and application. So nevertheless, Dan, thanks for coming on. We're super excited to talk about it. Being the industry expert in foam, just give us an overview of what's happening in the fire industry right now. There seems to be a lot of controversy. People are seeing this stuff all over TV. There may be fear about it. So just kind of give us a general overview, and I think we can go from there.
Well, good morning, Bruce, and good morning, Jason. Yes, there is a tremendous amount of controversy on the Class B side of foam. Foam was kind of taking a black eye due to groundwater contamination around areas where Class B foam was discharged on a daily basis, such as military bases and foam firefighting training centers. Over a period of decades, the older Class B foams containing PFAS, perfluoroalkyl substances, has been accumulating in the ground. At every airport in the United States and military bases, the common practice was to discharge foam for 1 minute out of the roof turret and then use a refractometer to make sure the foam equipment was in fact proportionally accurate. So if you do that every shift change, so once a day at least, for 40 years, something's going to accumulate in the environment. So the water wells around these areas have been tested, for contamination, not only for PFAS. That's not what they were looking for. They were just looking for general contamination with carcinogens and things that make people sick. The method of detection, as of 10 years ago, was only in parts per billion. So it was almost undetectable in these water wells. The technology has come forward, and now they can detect PFAS levels and contamination levels in parts per trillion. 70 parts per trillion is a trigger for an environmental problem, deeming drinking water unsafe. So, the level of detection is so good now that they can detect these minute amounts in drinking water. This led to lawsuits. Lawyers grab onto something that they can use. This is it's proven that there are these contaminants in this groundwater, and they try to sue anybody and everybody that has something to do with it. Still back foam manufacturers and then the manufacturers of the chemicals that are used to make firefighting foam. So they kind of backed off the foam manufacturers and went after companies such as 3M, which, by the way, stopped producing foam in 2002 because they knew there was a problem with their electrochemical process in making firefighting foam chemistry. There's PFAS in other products as well.
That's one of the things I was going to ask you, Dan, is we hear all about this. Oh, it's foam, and it's the PFAS in the foam. What else has PFAS in it?
Okay. Pretty much there are over 1,100 varieties of PFAS in different things. Non-stick cookware, Teflon, is made with a pre-PFAS process. Now, in its Teflon in its normal state is fine. It's, it's a solid in a pan. But everybody knows, you start striking with a fork over a couple of years and on heat, that stuff's breaking off. And where is it going? People are ingesting it. So that's another source. Food contact paper is treated with a PFAS chemical, so it doesn't leach grease through the bags. So you take, say, a white bag from, a fast food chain with French fries and a hamburger in it. That French fry and hamburger is still greasy, but you don't see it on the white bag, so it has the appearance of being clean. Scotch-Guard is probably the number one contributor by treating fabrics, carpets, chairs, anything that they want to shed water or shed stains. So your skin is in direct contact with those chemicals. You're ingesting it through non-stick cookware and food contact. Newspaper ring had PFAS in it for high-speed printing. It would allow the coefficient of spread for the ink to go on the paper faster. So they could run 1,000 papers an hour instead of, 500. It would double their time.
So
firefighting foam.
So Dan, the moral of the story is I shouldn't eat the wrapper on the hamburger.
Shouldn't eat the wrapper. Don't eat the cheese off the wrapper. That's the moral of the story. They pull the PFAS right out of it.
Dan, I'm going to be real clear about we see the lawsuits. Witmier Quick Tyrrell lawsuit or law firm is online saying, "Hey, join our class action." Something to be clear about. This is Class B foam, and we're going to talk about Class A and Class B foam. I think one thing for our audience: does this lawsuit affect Class A foam at all?
This lawsuit does not affect Class A foam at all. Class A foam is essentially like dish soap, to oversimplify it. All it does is either emulsify hydrocarbons or lower the surface tension of water. So anything that would normally absorb water will absorb more of it and hold on to it. Or you can use it as a pre-treatment on brush and dwellings and stuff where there's wildfires running through. It'll take longer for the water to boil out of those exposures before it catches on fire. But yes, Class A foam has never had any PFAS in it. Still doesn't. It's still essentially just soap.
So how about today's? So the Class B that had the PFAS in it, we're not going to dive in deep on how each state's handling it, because I understand each state's handling different how you dispose of it, and that could be a whole podcast in and of itself with more experts. But if I'm a fire company, and let's just assume I got rid of my old Class B foam, what's out there for me today?
Okay. The replacement for Class B foams or aqueous film forming foams, known as AFFF or alcohol-resistant variants, which are AFFF, have been replaced with a more modern fluorine-free foam. Fluorine is the molecule that allows an aqueous film to form or allow water to momentarily float on oil without getting too deep in it. So now the non-fluorinated foams, which are essentially modified Class A foams, have to use the water weight in the foam blanket entirely to isolate the fuel from the air or to extinguish the fire to isolate the fuel from the air. Application techniques are a bit different. It's sort of like going way back when there was only protein foams that didn't have a fluorinated compound in them. You just have to gently apply it and do your extinguishment. So there's a learning curve. Everybody's on the same learning curve. You have to learn good habits and good foam application techniques. There have been several successful extinguishments of road tanker fires using non-fluorinated foams, all caught on video. The first one that I know of was in Troy, Michigan. A dash cam captured a tanker that hit a median. The tanker lit up. The Commerce Township fire department came out with a foam trailer and their foam equipment. They got set up and were able to extinguish the fire in less than a minute after they were set up. It took them, an hour or so to get everything in line, but they were able to extinguish it. And it's on YouTube. It can be looked up. The most recent one was in Connecticut.
Okay. I was just gonna say, just so our audience understands, this isn't like a structure fire. This is a fire that's not easy to put out. So when you say they extinguished it in a minute after they got set up, that's terrific.
Yeah, it is. Yes. Full firefighting is not structural firefighting. There's a lot of tactics involved. You have to be at the right distance. You have to know your wind speeds. You have to know your application rate. How much foam do I actually need to put this fire out? In the Class B world, fires are fought by the square foot, not by how many gallons of fuel that there are. So it's everything exposed to the air. You may be able to put a tanker fire out with, say, 100 gallon a minute strain at 3%. You may not be able to get close enough at 100 gallons a minute, so you may have to back off and use a 500 gallon minute strain. But the more firepower you use, the quicker the fire is going to go out, as long as your application technique is good.
Go ahead and tell us about that recent incident in Connecticut.
Okay, the recent incident in Connecticut was in New Haven on I-95. A tanker truck had to avoid its stopped car on the highway and ultimately hit a bridge in Butler. And the truck lit up. It was sort of under the bridge and sort of outside of the bridge on the other side. New Haven Fire Department brought in a tower ladder and tried to put the fire out with water from a smoothbore nozzle. And what they did is they spread the fire around quite a bit. Companies nearby, King Industries, who makes chemicals of all manner, has foam units on standby. The fire brigade chief came out with their small foam rig. And once he was set up, he was able to extinguish the fire in less than a minute also and save 2 compartments of fuel on the truck. Not that that's important, but they didn't lose the whole load. The foam worked that efficient to put that fire out. The bridge, however, was lost. They had to demolish it.
It is important for our environment that they burn those other 2 loads.
Yes. Yeah, correct. It makes less non-specific hazardous waste that has to be remediated. The more foam you put down, and the more fuel that there is, the more dirt that needs to be dug up and disposed of. So there's great cost involved in that as well. It's not only the environmental side, but it's also the cost-wise. Somebody's got to pay that bill somewhere along the line. So the faster you put the fire out and the longer you keep the vapor suppression down or remediation crews arrive, the less foam you use and the less environmental damage there is.
So far we've covered the fact that Class A is safe. Class A is not affected by this. I don't think we can say that enough. Class A is good. Right. And now we've covered the fact that there are safe Class B foams out there. The next question becomes, we build foam systems at Safe Fleet here. We have our turbo foam. We have our Foam Pro systems. What can we do with these new foams? I hear talk all the time about how heavy is the foam. Talk to us about what viscosity means and how foam actually moves.
Okay. Class A foam moves like water. So any place that water will move, Class A foam will move. It's usually a non-issue in any foam system. Our foam systems are designed for Class A foam primarily. In the larger systems, the 2001, 2002, they can accommodate Class B foams. Foam uses a measurement, as all liquid does, in what they call centipores, or CK, CPS. What that is a spindle, sort of like a drill bit, that spins at a certain RPM and it's dipped into the liquid. The machine that measures viscosity is called a viscometer, a Brookfield viscometer, and then there's other viscometers out there, but Brookfield is the common industry accepted viscometer. When that drill bit is dipped into the liquid, it has resistance or torque, and you get a reading on your viscometer. Generally, you would spin the bit or the spindle at about 30 RPMs, and it gives you the torque it takes to break that liquid loose. This is used in firefighting foam and the food service industry. All liquids can be measured with this machine. The highest centipoise foams, PFAS foams, were about 2,500 centipoise, with one being in the 4,000 range. The one that's about 4,000 centipoise, that's a systems foam. That's entirely different from, what the systems that we make for mobile apparatus are. So say 2,500 centipoise is probably the worst it got from 2003 to 2018. The new fluorine-free foams have varying degrees of thickness or viscosity. Fortunately for us, the viscosity went down on many of them. It's around 1,300 to 1,700 for most foams, for most alcohol-resistant fluorine-free foams. But there's some that run up to about the 5,000 centipoise range, which is also a systems foam. And it works fine in systems, fixed systems, but it doesn't work well in mobile apparatus foams.
Right.
It doesn't like to move. With alcohol-resistant foams, they're known as fixotropic or non-Newtonian fluids, which mean they change viscosity with energy, sort of like ketchup. You squeeze the ketchup bottle, it comes out, it lands on your burger or your fries or your plate, and it thickens back up and it doesn't rot. So it thins out. That's a non-Newtonian fluid. So the viscosity actually goes down. And that's what we call dynamic viscosity. Dynamic viscosity could bring something that's 2,500 centipoise down to 200, depending on how much energy is applied to. And when it stops, it thickens up. In the foam industry, this is known as shear. The faster the product moves, the thinner it gets. Usually it'll be moving through a foam system, being injected at a high rate of speed, so it disperses in the water stream and makes a solution at an accurate rate. The same thing goes for a foam reductor. If you put the dip cube in thick liquid, it'll suck it up, it'll come out real thin, shear into the water, and proportion accurately.
So when you talk about a Foam Pro 2000 series or a turbo foam system, what's the recommended maximum centipoise that system can flow?
We recommend that safely 2,000 centipoise max for turbo foam or 2001 or 2002. Or smallest.
And for our audience, you can look up the centipoise on any foam you're purchasing, correct? It's commonly listed.
Correct. It's on a data sheet.
Okay.
In most cases, the centipoise is listed at a Brookfield number 4 spindle at 30 RPMs. Sometimes they'll list it at a Brookfield number 4 spindle at 60 RPMs. 30 RPMs gives you, that's the number you're looking for the best shear. If you go to 60 RPMs with that same spindle, it doubles the centipoise. So it makes it appear that the foam's actually thicker than it is.
Well, that's an important point. So it's just like lighting. We did our lighting webinar a few weeks ago, and we talked about raw lumens and effective lumens. So it's the same thing here. You can get confused easily.
Exactly. And sometimes it's a shell game with, manufacturers, but usually there would be no reason why that shouldn't advertise their 30 RPM number, because that's going to give you the lowest number. But it's readily available on any foam data sheet.
Sure.
Yeah. Now there's, go ahead, Bruce.
No, you
Bruce.
can finish.
Okay. There's some Class A foams that are coming out today, not today, but in the last year, that are actually thick, and they present as almost like an alcohol-resistant foam. But they are not alcohol-resistant. It's just a Class A foam suspended in a thicker liquid. And I've seen some upwards of 500 centipoise. Got some samples from some manufacturers and ran it through a viscometer. And, that's fine for pretty much any foam system on the market. Like the turbo foam, And the Foam Pro 2000 series, they can handle up to 2,000 centipoise. Our smaller units, the 1600 and 1501, can only handle about 400 centipoise because they don't have a lot of suction side energy to move the foam through the system. So they're really, truly a Class A system only. And it's just fire beware. Just make sure that the viscosity isn't over 500 for a 1600.
Great information.
So Dan, we've talked like definitely deep in the weeds about foam and what's happening. It might seem to a fire department that foam is, I don't know how to explain it. Maybe it's overwhelming or I just don't know a lot about it, so I don't want to mess with it. Talk about, we advertise here safely that it's easy, it's less training, it's cost effective when you have a foam system. Can you just highlight, why those points are true?
Foam systems are very important because you don't have a high learning curve. It's pretty much press the button, turn the system on, proportioning rate, and you're going to get foam out of the nozzle. On the Class A side, you have a wide variety of proportioning rates from 1/10 of 1% to 1% to use the foam. Usually, the foam system is set at a default that, some officers or authority having jurisdiction has made an SOG saying we're going to go at 0.3% for our foam for our initial attacks and maybe bump it up to 0.5% for overhaul and 1% for exposure. But the average firefighter, especially in the volunteer world, that shows up at 3 o'clock in the morning and has sort of brush fire, pulls the trunk up and they need to use foam, may not be the most experienced person out there, but they know put it in pump, press the button, and the nozzle operator is going to get foam out of that nozzle. And that could be with a Class A or Class B fire. And they just have to know the limitations of the system. Like, don't go after something that's too big with your Class B system.
So you made a great point there. It's simple. It can be very easy to use. But one of the things you said, 3 a.m, I get it in pump. I flick the switch on. I've got foam. When I don't have foam, because that happens, can you explain a little bit what goes into the maintenance? What should our listeners be looking for? What should they be doing to the system to assure themselves that when they do flip that switch, they get foam?
Foam systems need to be exercised regularly. I would recommend at least once a month turning the system on and making some foam with it. Every third drill night, maybe. You don't have to put a tremendous amount of foam down. If you're using Class A, there's no environmental issue at all. There's no environmental issue with the new non-fluorinated Class B foams. So long as you don't put too much down and draw attention to what you're doing. And it's always a good idea to have MSDS sheets for the foam that you're using in the rig, should somebody ask, for the general public.
Head it off at the pass.
But it's very important to exercise the foam systems to move any, say stale Class A foam through the short tube that runs from the tank to the foam pump. Keep everything kind of lubricated and make sure it operates properly.
Say something happens, are they pretty easy to service?
Yes, they're extremely easy to service. Most of the time, the system has some sort of diagnostic capability, and it'll kind of almost tell you what's wrong with her. The firefighters we're not supposed to try to repair stuff without some sort of, or somebody that's assigned to do maintenance. That person is usually pretty familiar with this type of system, and it's easily repairable. Most common type of problem you may see is flow meter, the water flow meter, not registering. So the system won't come on if it doesn't see water flow. However, on the turbo foam and foam pros, we have a simulated flow mode. So we can bypass the paddle wheel should there be something wrong with it or suspect something's wrong with it. The system will still come on and deliver foam at a rate based on 100 gallons of.
Gotcha.
And one of the things that I know I've encountered, and maybe you could talk about, all foam systems, correct me if I'm wrong, even Class A, I believe, should have a strainer on them, correct?
Absolutely. A strainer is a must, especially in the Class A system, because you're trying to squeeze a very minute amount of liquid through an orifice, through a pump that's sensitive to debris. So it's important to, absolutely necessary, not more important, it's absolutely necessary to have that strainer in the.
So it's something for our audience. If you have a foam system on a rig, you want to check that strainer quite often, clean it out, make sure it's serviced. But if you go to check that strainer and you say, hang on, we don't have a strainer in our system, at that point, Dan, you would recommend that they go to a service center and get a strainer added to the system, correct?
Absolutely. The strainer is a must. The debris that comes through poly tanks could be just shaving from when they made the form, and that will destroy a small foam pump. They will not go through the pump. It may be rebuildable, or you may have to scrap the pump and actually replace the pump head to make it work again.
So this is general. So I'm speccing a new apparatus, and I know that I need a foam system, but I don't know what foam system to get. Maybe, and I get it. It depends on your application, and it depends on the content that you're in. But maybe there's like 2 or 3 systems or top 2 systems you would recommend that will have you covered. Because there's some departments that, again, they might only use it once a year, right? Or they might be.
It's a great question, Bruce. And I was just thinking about this, Dan. We can probably do a whole nother entire podcast on sizing a system. But I think Bruce is getting a great point. If you just wanted to give a customer a quick reference right now on maybe the top 3 things to consider when they're trying to spec a foam system for their rig.
Okay. Well, your maximum flow output, how much solution do you want to make? How much foam does the system pump into the water stream? That would be the number one factor. Second would be you need a Class B component with it. Do you need an A-B system, a 2-tank system, or something that can pick up foam off board for Class B and Class A on board? Do you need it? That's the next question. Third is how much space do you have on the rig, or what's your budget? What's your budgetary constraints to get a foam system on board? I would say that would be my top 3.
One of the things that we've been saying in these podcasts when we talk about apparatus is everything comes at a cost, and it's not just a dollar cost. Everything's affected on that rig. So like you're saying there, if I add a foam system, don't just look at that once in a generation fire and say, well, I need the biggest foam system ever made because it's going to increase wheelbase. It's going to increase the weight of the rig. You're going to need a bigger engine to drive it. You're going to need a bigger tank, which is going to increase the weight. So there's a lot of little factors that play in, correct?
That is correct. There's a lot of factors in the design of getting a foam system on board. Everything adds cost to it. The busier you go, the more expensive it's going to be. Or that's how it is in our industry. Everybody wants the biggest and baddest, but they don't always need the biggest and baddest. Sometimes they just need what works for that.
Absolutely.
Dan, biggest mistakes that you see when operating foam systems out in the field?
When people are operating foam systems, generally they're pretty simple, so it's just an on-off type thing. But one thing would be to adjust proportioning ratio from the default setting. On the Class A side, it's not going to hurt much. If you're going to 0.3, you get kind of a brothy foam that breaks the surface tension and gets in between the carbon and allows things that normally absorb water to absorb more of it. Sometimes the operator wants to turn knobs and press buttons, and they do something to make the foam system, proportion rich. So say they're going at 1%, which also isn't a problem with Class A because it's all going to work out. Problem is, if you're at 1% and you only have a small foam cell, you're going to run out of foam before your job is done, or the fire is out, or whatever. Then you're left with water, which is fine. Water works, foam works better.
How about when you're finished, Dan? When you're done at the end of an incident, you've flowed foam. Maybe as we start to wrap up here, talk about flushing the system.
Okay. On smaller Class A systems, what you want to do is turn your foam system off and get the foam solution out of the lines, out of the hose. Because it does have, certain solvents and things in it. It may deteriorate the liner inside the hose, depending upon what type of hose it is. There's, 1,000 different hoses out. But it's important to flush out your hose and your discharges and your manifold to keep that clean. Some of the smaller foam systems don't have flush from tank to the foam pump. So it's usually left flooded with Class A foam, which isn't, most Class A foams are pretty benign as far as corrosion. I have noticed some foams, though, that have a fairly low pH, which is also on the data sheet. Low pH is in the acidic range, and it'll cause corrosion to a lot of materials of construction with foam systems, especially if there's any iron involved or non-stainless type plumbing or brass plumbing. You'll get corrosion. Also, if the system got flushed from tank through the pump, it would work, flawlessly pretty much every time in my. But those systems are designed to stay flooded with Class A foam. If you're using Class B foam, the system must be flushed, especially alcohol-resistant foam. It starts breaking down kind of the minute it starts moving. So there's a plug of foam in that hose to the pump that needs to be flushed out. If that could potentially harden up, kind of like turn into a doughy substance, even though it's not contaminated with anything. And it may become very difficult for that system to move that little slug through. In Class B world, flushing is critical. Class A, not so much.
Terrific.
Yeah, exactly. So, as we finish up here, a little bit of a round table. Dan, Jason, any final comments, remarks about kind of what we talked about today? I think the biggest takeaways, right, is it's not Class A foam. We'll say that. And then if you're eating the cheese off of your burger wrapper, you might need to call for some help. You might be in trouble.
And wearing stay-free pants and reading a newspaper.
That's right. That's right. But in all seriousness, again, foam is getting somewhat of a bad rap, and I think we've dispelled a lot of those myths today and kind of talked about what's happening in the industry. And then also we pivoted and talked about how foam systems are essentially plug and play, right? They are easy to a sense as long as, again, what we talked about, you keep up the maintenance, you flush it after use. It's just like anything. You maintenance it, it's going to last you a lifetime.
Right.
I'll open up the floor to Jason, Dan. Any final comments? If not, it's all good too.
Dan, go ahead if you got anything final.
All right. Yeah. And just reiterate what Bruce said about it's a lifetime component of an engine. There's some foam systems that have been around since the 80s that are still in service because they've been well maintained and used. The more use that they got, the longer they last. Like the ones that don't get used are much or at all are the ones that fail.
Right. My only closing comment would be, number one, foam is safe. Today's new Class B foams are safe. Class A always has and remains to be safe. And don't shy away from it. Just because you've seen all these lawsuits out there, it's still a really good tool to have in your toolbox that can help you. If it's Class A, it can help you extinguish a structural fire faster, use less water, do less damage. And if it's Class B, if you've got a Class B type fire, you need that Class B foam. So don't be afraid of it. The new stuff does work.
Yeah, no, thanks, Dan. I think this is one of those episodes that's really going to be key, and I think there's a lot of great information out of it. I think it might be one of those you have to listen to maybe a couple times because you're going to find something new each time. So I really appreciate your time today, Dan, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you down the road as well. So this concludes another episode of Rig Recon Live, where we talked about foam and all things foam included. If you haven't already, make sure you like, follow, and share our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us on social media at Rig Recon. And if you haven't done so already, visit our website, www.rigrecon.com. We do have a foam product guide. We have a whole entire section dedicated to talking about foam and foam systems and the safety of foam. So if you like what you heard here, you could read more, you can watch more videos on rigrecon.com. Until then, spec the best.